Yes.
Oh, oh, oh. Don't just stand there. Do something. Oh, my goodness. Well, get behind me.
I am behind
Well, get
you.
closer.
I can't get any closer.
Oh.
Now, you ready?
Yes,
Be calm. Left foot first.
All right.
We have most likely heard of censorship at one point or another, but it's not easy to have a firm understanding of how it works. Censorship, while filtering out information deemed inappropriate for the public, actually functions as a piece of technology. However, while most technologies focus on streamlining processes or developing new tools for use, the purpose of censorship is to shape how people view the world. Most forms of technology alter our perception of the world indirectly, but censorship takes a direct approach to set guidelines for how we create and consume entertainment, influencing our perception of society in both the past and present. In the modern film industry, you might have seen it as this or this.
Stay calm! Wait.
Of course, censorship is decided by people, so in fact, it's rather subjective. Typically, censorship standards in the U.S. can be traced back to the late 1920s and 1930s, a time when conservative leaders in the country feared the rise of increasing vulgar, violent, and overtly sexual content in films. In response, they formed the Motion Picture Production Code to limit explicit content in films, and from there, systematic film censorship was born. Popularly known as the Hays Code, the Motion Picture Production Code was created by Hollywood movie studios because they feared the formation of a government-run censorship program. In 1930, the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America created the Studio Relations Committee as the administration for the censorship code. The Motion Picture Production Code governed films from 1930 until 1968. However, from 1930 until 1934, films that did not conform to regulations still ran in America's cinemas without penalty. This 4-year span became known as the pre-code period because it came before the enforcement of the code. In 1934, the Studio Relations Committee reconstructed as the Production Code Administration and became more influential. Unlike the earlier years of film, Hollywood had become more male-dominated by the time the code had arrived, and throughout its development and enforcement, existing records provide little to no evidence of contribution from women in the industry. However, women were often heavily involved with the adaptation of films from other media, and as such, many had a thorough understanding of the code's guidelines as well as its loopholes. During the silent film era, films like The New York Cat, written by Anita Luce, ran without censorship. It was not until films grew more ambitious and the arrival of sound era that the production code was enacted. One of the first recorded instances of film censorship, the 1897 Statute of Maine, prohibited the showing of prize fight films. In 1907, Chicago enacted a censorship ordinance that gave the police chief the power to screen films and determine whether or not they were appropriate to be shown in theaters. In 1911, Pennsylvania was the first of many states to enact statewide film censorship. The 1915 Supreme Court case, Mutual Film Corporation versus the Industrial Commission of Ohio, determined that films were commerce, not art. This meant that the First Amendment did not pertain to film, so local, city, and state censorship programs had the power to edit or ban films. During this delocalized censorship period, the same film often varied in content shown in theaters from one state to the next. Let's take a closer look at some of the clips we've already seen. Between the years of 1930 and 1934, many films that broke the production code still ran in theaters. For example, the 1932 film Merrily We Go to Hell, directed by Dorothy Arzner, a female pioneer director, was produced and distributed, although it had profanity in its title. The code also led to many films meandering around the subject of sex. Merrily We Go to Hell disregarded the code by directly introducing topics such as open marriages. The Hollywood Production Code stated that criminals should never have the advantage in a plot, and nudity, sex scenes, and homosexuality were implied as taboo, but never outlawed by the code. Because of this time, however, the code still allowed for narratives and plots that called on racism or anti-Semitism. Many storylines were whitewashed and taken out of context because the vital scenes that needed to be shown just weren't under the production code. Frequently, censorship had a negative effect on the storyline, much to the disappointment of the viewers. An example of this can be seen in the film adaptation The Girl from Missouri, originally written by Anita Luce. In this film in particular, the audience was said to be left in a haze as to the contents of the plot, which was so simplistic compared to what it would have been in the pre-code cinema time period. From this film, the shower scene is fully clothed, not exactly how it would look in pre-code cinema. In the 1937 film adaptation Bringing Up Baby, written by Hagar Wilde, the Hayes production office did not seem to have an issue with the film's subtle hints at homosexuality, but they were widely concerned with the ripped dress scene. Acceptably, however, the main character Susan was in fact wearing granny panties underneath her dress. Instances of the sort occurred until the 1960s when our current rating system replaced the production code. This rating system is still in existence today and administered by the MPAA. The common ratings are G for general audiences, PG for parental guidance suggested, PG-13 for parental guidance recommended for those 13 and under, R for restricted content, and NC-17 specifically for restricted content for those of the age 17 or under. These ratings are mostly intended to address the concerns of exposing younger audiences to provocative ideas and adult themes, but compared to the early production code, they serve as a more progressive form of censorship. Nowadays, not all explicit content is banned, but rather it is only restricted to more mature adult audiences. Overall, whether through the code or the current MPAA system, we see that censorship takes a direct approach to control how viewers consume entertainment, functioning as a piece of technology to set guidelines on our perception of the world around us.